Finance Committee. He's like,
Good evening, and I'd like to call to order the February 27th meeting of the Finance Committee. First order of business is to accept the minutes of January 13th,
so moved.
16th, excuse me.
Moved again.
Second.
Any discussion? No, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the meeting minutes are accepted. Next item of business is the town manager's report. Mr. Mizuko?
I don't have anything specific to go over in my report this evening.
Okay, well, that moves us on to agenda item number 4, the budget hearings. I guess first on the agenda is the town meeting budget overview. Mr. Mizuko?
So I'm going to present kind of a high-level overview of the budget, and I'll focus on the revenue side, and of course, really the balance of the rest of your hearings, both today and the following 2 Saturdays are on the expenditure side of things. But I think there's a couple key things that I want to point out this year. So we do have the hearings tonight and the next 2 Saturdays, which will be full days of business. I just want to remind everyone here and at home, there's 2 ways that you can view the budget this year, and we're very happy and proud about that. I can't commend David Snowden enough for all the work that he's done on the budget document and on the Transparency Center with our new ClearGov tool that was made possible through a Community Compact grant. That's a program and initiative of Lieutenant Governor Polito. So we really have to thank them as well. So in the first area is the budget document itself, which is, consistent with what you've seen in the past few years. But as we've talked about, it continues to evolve and become more and more thorough and hopefully more and more clear on what it is that we're doing with the funds that we're spending. That can be accessed through the town's website. You can just go to the search bar on the website and type in budget, and that will come up. And then the new tool, which is an interactive visual budget where you can drill down and really get a better understanding kind of at a more of your own pace, or drill down into areas maybe we didn't in the budget document. That's also available through the internet at cleardov.com. /Massachusetts/Worcester/town/Shrewsbury. So you can access that through that bar that is up there on the screen through the town's webpage itself, though, so you don't have to go directly to that URL. So happy to get any feedback, especially from the Finance Committee, on the new ClearGov tool and the budget document itself. It's something that we look forward to working with you on and continue to evolve throughout the course of time to present the financials as clear as we can. So tonight I'm going to talk about just a general summary of the overall financial position of the town. We're going to do an overview of revenues and just a very high-level overview of expenses, and then we'll get into the individual departments on a functional basis like we started last year. Tonight we have public safety and community development planning. So without further ado, I'll jump right in on the summary. We'll focus on operations throughout the next budget hearings. Some highlights: the new budget tool that I've already mentioned, that is up and available for everyone to take a look at as of earlier this week. I'm going to talk a little bit about some highlights at this point. Debt service schedule. As everyone knows, the high school will be paid off at the end of fiscal year '23. So there is an opportunity within the exempted tax levy that we will see a reduction, beyond the final payment of the high school. And in its last year, that will be about $2.6 million. So we certainly have other projects in the pipeline that could line up nicely and keep the tax rate rather level, but that is certainly a benefit because we model our debt on a declining debt service basis and normally retire it in 20 years. So we have that opportunity to take advantage of and look forward in the future. I'll talk a little bit about, in a couple of minutes, the overall financial position of the town, which remains very strong. I'm going to talk a little bit about unrestricted recurring revenue, which is a challenge, especially in this year's budget, and how that plays out into what I think you'll hear over and over again, especially hear from myself at a high-level overview and Dr. Sawyer, that this has been a very challenging budget year with a very small amount of unrestricted revenues to go around into our operating budgets. We're seeing a trend in outsourced activities, those contracted services that we utilize to augment staff and provide services. Very strong economy, costs are escalating faster, definitely faster than 2.5% or 3%, which our revenues are increasing. And we've started to do a lot of analysis as to whether or not it makes sense to start to consider bringing some of those services and workload back in-house with staff. There's a couple examples of that within the budget process. One you'll hear later tonight within the building inspector's office, something that we have been talking about year over year, where we've been augmenting town staff with contracted services. We've done some analysis on total cost for adding an additional half FTE, making one position full-time that's currently part-time, and there's clearly savings in the near-term and long-term for bringing that position back in-house versus contracting it out. And then capital investments. Won't focus a lot about that during the budget hearings, but it's certainly a challenge. Things are expensive. You know, we're now into a phase where one of the capital projects, for instance, this year is the replacement of Parker Road School roof. You know, that's a $600,000 initiative just to continue to maintain the good facilities that we have. That, along with you know, a slew of other capital needs of the town, we're not able to satisfy the total requests or requirements of the departments. You know, nor will we likely ever be able to. But you know, as less complex projects like roof replacements occur because of some of the aging facilities and buildings, it eats through a lot of the available funds that we have and limits the number of total projects that we have in any given year. So Dave, if you can move on. So I'll talk a little bit about total reserves, free cash and stabilization in the transition. Free cash was certified at its highest level ever within the community, $8.6 million. And I think but we also have a stabilization balance currently of almost $2.2 million. One of the things that I really like is that although we've focused a lot on moving money out of free cash and into the stabilization account, we haven't yet eroded, you know, the balance of free cash. I noted that it was the highest certification that it ever has been. Stabilization account balances is one of its highest levels ever. So I'm very proud to see that we continue to have strong financial reserves of the town, which we'll continue to build upon into next fiscal year. I do project really initially this early in the budget phase that we'll have roughly $5.7 million in free cash on certification next year if kind of the normal trends continue, that revenues exceed budgets by, you know, roughly $1 million, and total town department turnback somewhere around $1.5 million, building on the base that we plan to leave there after all expenditures, and not getting too aggressive or creative with any other aspects of what could contribute to free cash. I do project about $5.7 million there. Stabilization, which we'll get into whenever we review the warrant, we will be requesting at this point to put $835,000 additional dollars into that, bringing the balance of stabilization, if that's approved, to just over $3 million, about halfway to our policy goal. I still find that we're in a transition period as we continue to work on our total reserves and meet our new policy goals. And we're trying to transition reserves more from, you know, have less reserves in free cash and more in stabilization, the true rainy day fund of the community, that are locked away for those unforeseen and unexpected major challenges that may come up in the future. That all has, you know, all those positive changes, of course, led to a AAA bond rating, the highest possible rating for sort of rated entities by S&P Rating Services that we received this July in concert with our Beal borrowing. So moving into the fiscal year 21 revenues, at the start, we'll have almost $149 million worth of revenues that will be presented for allocation. That's roughly $6.5 million over the prior year, or 4.55% total change. But what I really want to focus on, Dave, if you can move ahead to the next slide, is the difference between restricted and unrestricted revenues. So you can see that more than 50% of the revenues of the $6.5 million of new revenues that we have are restricted. And what does that mean? They can only be used for particular purposes. So some examples of that is things like utility revenues that are dedicated for, that come in through water or sewer rates, and we only spend those on water and sewer expenditures. But the biggest item within this category is an increase of the exempted tax levy of $2.4 million for debt service related to the borrowing for the Beal Elementary School. So, having $6.5 million at the outset is a nice number to look at, but when we break it down to how flexible we can be with those new revenues, it gets much more challenging because almost $4 million of that is restricted. And now I'll talk a little bit about the unrestricted revenues. And these revenues are generated from the general tax levy, areas like local receipts, free cash, et cetera. So we have the broad discretion over the use of these revenues, but they are primarily used within the general operations of the municipal and school departments. So it's a 2.66% increase year over year in the unrestricted revenues. So we really start to see that challenge that's been presented throughout the fiscal year 21 budget process. Move forward. So how do we plan to spend the unrestricted revenues? It really breaks out into these categories. To town, a little over $1 million. To school, almost 1.4, not quite there. And other charges and expenses, which we can detail out, later on when we look at the master balance sheet, a little over $200,000. And I will begin to focus on the town revenues as, from the high level. When we look at general municipal operations, it includes utility costs. So most of that change is related to restricted revenues. And then on the school side, the $1.4 million is mostly unrestricted revenues. You can see a net decrease year over year on capital utility investments and other costs, of just a little over $200,000 in each category. So how are we going to expend those dollars within the general municipal operations? Again, on the town, a little over $1 million for the general municipal departments, things like police, fire, general finance and administration. Within the health insurance category, we're projecting a 7.4% required increase, a little over $880,000, pushing that total expenditure up to nearly $13 million. Again, debt service taking up a large chunk of the restricted revenues, and utility operations as well, increasing by about $1.2 million, also using restricted revenues. I do have the notes at the bottom of the screen, and I don't want anyone to think that we're being anything but transparent with this. It's not a knock or a drawdown on the school. Dr. Sawyer and Mr. Collins are great partners as we work throughout the budget process. We meet very frequently and share each other's pain throughout the course of this year for sure, and are always trying to find ways to stretch the dollar as much as we can. But we just have noted within any parts of the town side, whether that's general municipal operations and public facilities, health insurance, or debt service, what aspects of those expenditures are attributed to the operation or assets of the school department. So just at a very high level, where we'll focus the balance of our total hearings will be the expenditure of these funds within these particular categories, administration and finance, where health insurance and other general operations lie, public safety, which we'll focus on all of tonight, and then in the future meetings, retirement, Public Works will be the main feature of the second Saturday hearing this Saturday hearing, Community Development, which we'll touch on some tonight, Human Services. Education will have the first half of the second budget hearing on Saturday, second Saturday budget hearing, and debt and interest. So all in all, the categories are very similar to year over year, and we look forward to working through each one of these with you throughout the course of these hearings. This is the final slide that we'll touch on tonight. I did mention it a little bit earlier this evening about kind of the bump that we're in for the current committed debt service schedule. You can see the peak years being fiscal year 21 and 22, with a significant reduction in fiscal year 23 as the high school debt is completely retired, really giving us a gap of about $2.6 million year over year to be able to work within or realize that benefit of retiring that debt. So happy to answer any questions about kind of the general overview, and we'll certainly get into the hearings when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mizikar, Mr. Snowden, Ms. Loss. It's a fantastic step every year. This gets more transparent, more revealing, more interesting. There's more to learn, more to catch up on, but more abilities to do that with these presentations. So I want to start with that. This is my 4th or 5th year doing this, and it's not a long time, but I certainly notice as it changes. Thank you. I have a question of the overview. We talked about the difficulty we're in, the pain that we're sharing on the municipal side and the school side, but I don't see those numbers here. So can you explain that better for me, for the committee, and for the folks who are watching, the millions of people in our studio and home audiences?
What do you mean?
What pain, like,
Sure.
all I see here is that our unrestricted is up 2.66%.
Yep.
Um,
Yep, so
where's the problem? Could you explain it out better?
So, I mean, from a very high level aspect, 2.66% in new revenues, unrestricted revenues year over year becomes quite a challenge. We are a very, just like most every other municipality, we're very heavy expenditures on the personnel side of things, trying to just give employees cost of living increases of 2% so they can continue to, function in their lives from a financial statement and keep up with inflation, is a challenge, whenever that's 80% of our costs. And, we're looking to just, keep their cost of living in check. And then on the general economic side, when we're looking at those contracts and other external costs, those things are moving at a clip a lot greater than 3% year over year. And as they move, as expenditures increase faster than revenues, which we've clearly seen this year, we're not able to fund everything. So to be very specific on the municipal side, we cut nearly $600,000 from all department requests in order to balance the budget. You've probably heard Dr. Sawyer say that his status quo budget is, roughly a 4.2% increase, which is, $2.9 million more than we've allocated to the school department in the town manager's fiscal projection 1. So that's really where the pain comes. We've done a lot of work to balance the budget, and there's a lot of worthwhile things that we weren't able to fund and probably will not be able to fund, even under best scenarios of improving numbers moving forward throughout the budget process. So that's where the pain really came into. So we're at balanced budget right now. We've allocated that $2.5 million in unrestricted, but we really, mainly on the school side, we're not likely to maintain service levels as we have, and on the municipal side, we're a little bit better off, but there will be some degrades in service and certainly no growth to help some departments just maintain service levels.
If I could follow up on that?
Okay.
Thank you. And do we attribute this low increase in overall funds and therefore in unrestricted revenue to pretty much a flattening of state aid? I mean, I'm just looking at our source here, and a flattening of local receipts? Is that what, because those also make up a big
Yeah.
chunk of the non-levy budget.
That's right. So, you know, the tax levy grows with Proposition 2.5, and we're projecting $808,000 in new growth. So that, you know, is really the lion's share, $77+ million that, you know, we're gonna expend from. But not all of our revenue sources are even growing at a rate of 2.5% or better. So, you know, there's some year-over-year challenges. Last year seems a lot easier, but last year was the first time that we really adjusted local receipts and tuned it up based upon some more heavy analysis, statistical review of prior years. So year-over-year, last year, local receipts went up over $1 million. So not being able to continue to feed at that rate, and, you know, this year it only going up $300,000 is where we start to see the challenges present themselves.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I just wanted to ask on the slide that was most recently up on the debt service projection, that has the new Beal School loaded in already. So
Completely.
there's nothing that's not loaded into this that we're looking at now.
That's correct. Now, the only thing that wouldn't be in there is we have not borrowed the entire amount for Beal. That project is trending under budget right now. We borrowed about 90% of the total town obligation, and, you know, so, you know, leaving about $10 million still to borrow, but we're not gonna have to borrow all that, barring any unforeseen significant changes in how that project's playing out. So, it would be a kind of a blip on that, you know, overall
Sure.
Debt service schedule, but there is just a little bit of Beal funding to still borrow.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments from the committee? Okay. Thank you. So I guess that would take us now to discuss the police department. Yeah, that's page 97.
Just so everyone knows, we're on page 97 within your budget books.
So just an overview from 2019. One new officer completed training, is now assigned to the patrol division. This year's budget request includes one additional patrol officer position. The requested budget will provide for staffing within the police department to include a total of 50 sworn officers. The breakdown would be 1 chief, 3 lieutenants, 8 sergeants, and 38 patrol officers. Additionally, there's 9 civilian dispatchers. The clerk's office is staffed with 5 administrative assistants, and we have oversight of the animal control officer. As part of a preventative strategy, we assign officers to specialized positions within the department. We believe that this is an extremely effective and efficient manner to deliver service to the community. Some of the areas where we have specialized officers include the traffic division. The officer responds to citizen complaints of traffic issues, investigates motor vehicle accidents involving death or serious injury, and is trained in accident reconstruction. 2 school resource officers, one exclusively at the high school, the second school resource officer assigned to the 2 middle schools and is a liaison to the elementary schools. Domestic violence officer who follows up on domestic violence issues, and he also is our liaison to victim advocates in the district attorney's office. Elder affairs officer who's involved in our triad partnership with the police department, fire department, council on aging, Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services. And this Elder Affairs Officer coordinates information exchange between the group. Our K-9 team is a supplement to our patrol division, consists of one officer and the police dog, and we continue to receive great community support on that program. The operational concerns continue to be the same. Calls for service are our number one priority. We need to staff to ensure officer safety. The requested budget will satisfy the current staffing needs. School safety, major concern in every community. We work closely with our school department to ensure safety and preparedness for emergencies. Traffic, historically and continues to be a major concern in the community. Investigations, our detective division handles a heavy caseload. Cases have become more complicated, including internet crime, financial crime, identity theft. Training, we continually strive to improve the training our officers receive. The lake patrols occupy a lot of our time during the summer months. We try to be as strategic and as efficient as we can with the deployment of our lake patrols, base it on time, weather events. We partner with the Worcester Police Department and the Environmental Police Department for our lake patrols. Dispatch, the increased staffing from a couple of years back has helped alleviate some of the workload. Our dispatch continues to be extremely busy area of the department. And the opioid epidemic, like every community, we continue to deal with this issue. Our grant funding during the past year was $125,034. That included the E911 training reimbursement grant for $12,394 we received. The E911 support and incentive grant $100,410, and the Governor's Highway Safety Bureau Traffic Enforcement grant $12,500. The capital budget request is for our annual cruiser replacement program. And again, it's this year, as was last, for 4 marked units at the cost of $58,750 each, which includes 4 mobile data terminals within the cruisers. As far as our incident statistics go, the police department measures activity through incident numbers tracked through our record management system. Incidents represent the total of calls for service, directed patrols, assignments, administrative functions, and other police and other officer activity. During 2019, we saw an approximate 7.5% increase in calls for service compared to 2018. And our calls for service represented 43% of the total incidents for the year. The total incidents remain fairly consistent at 38,861 incidents, which was very close to the total for the prior year. Any questions on any of that information? Yes?
I was just curious about what are the calls for service versus the other incidents? What would the other incidents, what are those types of things?
Yep, so it would be police-initiated activity, motor vehicle stops, parking enforcement, that type of thing. Directed patrols, that's, as I described, our lake patrol assigning an officer to a particular location. And then other activity could be some administrative issues that may come into the station that we document through our record management system.
Thanks.
Chief, I have a question on the specialized officers that you mentioned before. Yesterday, I was watching the news, excuse me, last night, and the governor came on and was talking about the increase in hate crimes in the Commonwealth, and he had made a recommendation that each municipality have a specialized hate crime officer. Could you just talk about that a little bit?
We do have a hate crimes
You
officer.
do?
He's
Okay.
actually attending the sessions and the trainings.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Could I ask one other question? And I think I ask this everywhere, but every year, what kind of progress are we making on getting officers trained to detect non-alcohol driving under the influence type of things with either marijuana or other opioids or other drugs?
So we do have drug recognition experts. We have a few in the department trained right now. we will be looking to increase that as the schooling becomes available and the funding, our training budget allows us to send additional officers off. So it's something that we're in tune with.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it.
So we'll now move on to fire.
I don't think he's here yet, because it says 7:50.
He was planning to be here at 7:30.
You can go early.
Seeing we,
Do you want to do
Well-
emergency management?
Can we do something else?
Except you want to do emergency
I
management?
can buy him about 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Good evening.
is this emergency management
Yep.
thing?
So
Thank you.
Deputy Chief Colby will, who is the Emergency Management Director of the town, we're on page 103 within the budget books. If you're-
So this past year in 2019, the town was up to be recertified with the LEPC, which is the Local Emergency Planning Committee. That's an activity that happens every 5 years, and we were due for that this year. So Aaron Roy, who's the LEPC coordinator, chairman, he's been working on that throughout the year. We also received two grants from MEMA, which is the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. The first one was for $9,500, and that was based on our population. And then MEMA had additional funds available, so we were able to apply for a competitive grant. And we were one of the few communities in the Commonwealth that got it. And that was for $9,999, and that is for increasing our sheltering capabilities, particularly for people with mobility impairments and such. So we're in the process now of spending that money. The first grant, we do a match, the town does a match for it. The competitive grant, we got it and didn't have to do any match with that. Additionally, during the year, we did 2 tabletop exercises, one in February, which was a simulated gas leak near one of the schools in town. And then in December, we did a winter storm tabletop, which was, I think, the day after the 2-day storm that we had in December. So it was a little bit late, but it actually worked out good. We were able to review the town's response to it, and so it ended up working out in the long run. So that's really it in a nutshell. Most of the activities are, there's a lot of activities between the police and fire department, and we kind of coordinate all the town departments as well as private companies and state, so that's that.
Thank you. Any
I
questions?
have a question. Oh, thanks, that was a great summary. I was wondering, like, communicable diseases like the coronavirus, would that come under your function?
It certainly would if we've obviously been monitoring it, and the health department has as well. We've been passing along all the information that we get from the state and federal resources to the people in the town. Right now, it's just been kind of a tracking thing. We haven't had any action we've had to do, but we've been ramping up on it. We actually been fit testing everybody, which should be it's an annual event anyway, but fit testing all of the first responders in town for the N95 masks to make sure that they have the proper size if the time comes that we need them.
You-
I was going to ask the same thing, so.
I guess I have a question on the competitive grant. You said you were spending the money on sheltering. Could you talk specifically about how that money is used? I'm not sure I understand what sheltering means.
So for an emergency shelter, if
Okay.
there was a storm and we had to put residents up somewhere. So Oak Middle School is our town's primary shelter location.
Okay.
So particularly in the winter, if there was an extended power outage, people didn't have heat, we'd be able to do that. So we do have some equipment now. There's some stored at the school itself, and we do have a small trailer that has supplies in it, some cots and stuff like that. This is to increase our capabilities. So this will actually be, we're gonna be replacing it with a larger trailer so that we can fit more in. And then, there's gonna be some wheelchairs and stuff like that to be able to get people that aren't, that have mobility impairments, to be able to address them and be more ADA compliant.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Chief.
Good job.
Yeah, well, that's all we need.
Could we move on to planning and economic development then? Is that,
Yeah.
Go by item 5.
You can go to other items on the
or
agenda.
should we go to,
If you want to go to other item, well, yeah, you can remain in the hearing and, yeah, if you want to review the other items on the agenda,
Okay.
since we're getting
so,
to.
item 5 then, review of the meeting schedule, which we kind of did, but. So, February 29th, so this coming Saturday is a budget hearing, that's, scheduled from 9 to 4. And then March 7th, the following Saturday, again, is that 9 to, is that 9 to 4, and that's, is that,
think so.
with just the schools, or are there some additional departments in the morning?
So the schools are in the morning, and then there's administration and finance in the
Okay.
afternoon.
Right. And then March 19th, which is a Thursday meeting.
Is that the meeting we are supposed to finalize our document, I think? The Finance Committee document that we're working on, I think we were scheduled on the 19th to finalize that, I guess.
Okay.
Excuse
So
me,
even though
Chief.
we've got it on the agenda to have some discussion tonight. so
Right. And so-
I-
we'll be
I'm not,
taking-
sorry, I don't think we ever actually opened the public hearing.
Oh, okay.
I just we might want to do that
Okay.
before we have
So
any.
do you make a motion?
I make a motion, well, I think it comes from the chair usually, but I would
Okay.
make a motion to open a
Alright.
public hearing.
All right, so can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? All right, the public hearing is open. Thank you, Anna.
Sure.
Okay, so March 19th, that's where we're working to finalize the document, as John has stated. And then on April 16th, it's one of our Thursday night meetings, a public hearing for the warrant articles. And then again on April 23rd, again a Thursday night meeting, continuation of the public hearing on town meeting articles.
Could I ask one question in relation to that on the public hearing documents? And do we have a finalized date yet where the warrant has to go to press? Have we decided that yet, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah, we have that.
Would that be like the 25th, is it, or, I don't know.
That for you, one second.
Usually around. It's about that. I don't know what it is, but it's usually around
I
there.
think it was in one of the original budget, when he had the budget timeline schedule up.
So we usually have it available for the town election, which is May 5th. So we usually send it out to press right after your meeting. You meet on April 23rd, your recommendations, we usually finalize everything with the printer on the 24th.
Yeah, and don't we, is it get sent out that Friday, or is it like the following Monday?
It gets sent to the printer on the 24th, that Friday,
Okay,
and then we do one proof, and then they generally go to print Tuesday or Wednesday, the 28th or 29th, so they're available at the polls for the 5th.
all right.
What was that date? I'm sorry.
The 24th
Okay, April 24th.
is effectively our drop dead date.
Great. So the fire chief is here, so it's, we would like to review the fire department budget. Good
How you
evening.
doing? How's everybody?
I'm actually early, not late.
That's correct. The fire department's on page 100.
There you go, okay. Well, I'd just like to say, I think it was a very positive year for the fire department as far as being very fortunate with getting grants that help supplement our staffing. If you remember last year, one of the main concerns that I had at the fire department was the lack of staffing keeping up with the growth in town. And we were fortunate to get a $570,000 grant to help get the staffing started for the next few years, of which the first 2 years, 75% will be paid for by the federal government, 25% by the town, and then in the third year, it's 35%. So it helps get us started in January. First week of January, we started 4 new firefighters on the job full-time. And for the first time in pretty much forever, we have 3 firefighters at Station 2 rather, next to Way, next to the CVS in the area that used to be Spags. So we've also had good luck with getting some grants for programs to get smoke detectors in homes for people that might, need some assistance putting them in or even affording to put them in. Folks that are handicapped, mobility problems, and we're gonna be installing them in 2020 and beyond. We had just about $15,000 in grants to help us get that program started. We've got new washers and dryers installed in the fire stations, money that came from grants as well to keep contamination and cancer out of the living areas, and so the guys aren't bringing this stuff home to their families, because every time they go to a fire, there's decontamination issues that we deal with, and firefighters have a much higher likelihood of contracting cancer than the general public, so we're doing everything that we can. The town did have to put some money in for that as well. We got the equipment for free, but the installation, a lot of it we had to either do ourselves or pay a contractor to come in. But we did get basically about $40,000 worth of equipment that the town didn't have to pay for, so we've done pretty well that way. A couple of years ago, we were appropriated money for new air packs, SCBA. That has proved to be a great purchase. We have had basically 0 problems with the packs since we've got them. Some of the neighboring towns have now adopted the same piece of equipment since, we purchased them. And the city of Worcester, I've just been told, is going to be switching over to the same equipment that we have that has a built-in thermal imager for not only for search and rescue and being able to see, but for the personal safety of the firefighters. So I thank everybody for, approving that kind of big appropriations for equipment that we really need. Right now, we're waiting on the production of a new engine 1. Money was appropriated last May, and it should be here late June, early July. But it's in production in Pennsylvania at KME is the name of the company, Kovach Mobile Equipment. So from that standpoint, it's been very good. The morale on the department seems very good. We've been working with Kevin too to look at creating the rank of lieutenant within the department as well, so that we'll have a supervisor at Station 2. For years, we've been running with, only 2 people in the outlying stations. Neither one was a supervisor. It was just 2 firefighters there, and so I think it's a big upgrade in safety and service to the community. So I kind of rambled a lot of stuff out right there, but But honestly, it's been really a very good year. It's been great working with everybody.
Thank you. Pat?
Chief, on the air equipment that you recently purchased, what's the expected lifespan of that equipment?
The air packs and everything is 15 years.
15 years, so
Yep.
you're good for a while. Are there maintenance costs involved?
Only if we break them. They have a 15-year warranty was another reason that we went with this company as well. There's a 15-year warranty on them. The other company we had used previously only had a 5-year warranty on theirs, and honestly, I thought we kept the packs a little bit. My decision, my fault. We kept them a little bit longer than we should have, and we ran up about $40,000 in repairs that extra 5 years, so I'm not sure if we really saved all that much, so.
Could I ask one other question, please? And on the SAFER grant, I'm so happy you got that and were able to get the 4 firefighters. Is that something that potentially down the road could be recurring if you found that we were still?
Yes, I've had
Sure.
discussions with Kevin about potentially putting in for another grant within the next year or two, and trying our hand at it again. I think we've got a firefighter on the department that he worked for Worcester Public Health. He worked here in town, actually, as in the health department as well, and he's had a lot of internships and when he was going to Worcester State on getting grants and stuff. So we partnered him up with some of the other, it's kind of like a group effort, but Michael Borowicz has really taken the lead on this. Fortunately, I've been chief going into my 11th year now. I made a pretty good network of people, so I've pointed him to this person or that person, and he's got together with a lot of these folks now, and he's really become excellent at doing grants. He also works part-time for Northborough and helps them with their grants as well, and we're actually going to work on putting a combined regional grant in to try to bring in about $400,000 worth of radio equipment to both Shrewsbury and Northborough in the next, we'll actually be finalizing the paperwork in the next couple of weeks, and then it's kind of a hurry up and wait with the grant process,
Just
basically.
one last follow-up. Are there examples of other communities that have been able to get these SAFER grants so fairly close together?
Yes. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I believe Burlington was successful. Needham, fairly similar demographics to Shrewsbury. Westboro actually got 8 firefighters all at once. I think we probably could have gotten that as well if we had gone for 8 to try to get 3 at Station 2, because we do have the need there. So I think it's actually the number that we need is one of the biggest factors with it to meet certain benchmarks. We've made a big stride, but we're not really to the place we'd like to be yet, but we're a lot closer, so.
Thank you.
Mark?
Thank you. Jim, what's the state, actually, this would be for Joe, what's the state of the fleet these days? How's everything holding up, considering the schedule, the anticipated schedule of the equipment?
As of right now, we're in pretty good shape. We've done a lot of work to keep stuff, spent a little bit of money on paint and refurbishments of a few vehicles to keep them a little bit longer than we normally would have. At this point in time, the next vehicle on the radar, so to speak, would be the rescue truck that we have, which is scheduled right now technically for fiscal 2024. So up until that point, the next vehicle that we have next year is just another one of the smaller command vehicles. So this year we have a capital outlay in there for replacement of the Ford Escape that we have. And next year we have the replacement of the Chevrolet Tahoe, which are both, one's a 2008, one's a 2007.
And did those two get through, are those in the budget at this stage? The
Just the Escape is in this year and next.
Escape Tahoes for the following year, right. Okay, thank you very much.
Mark?
Chief, great report. I really appreciate getting this beforehand and reading through it, and it really gives us a nice sense of what's happened. It sounds like it was a real productive year. on
Very
your
good,
behalf. On your behalf. Couple of questions. First of all, also kudos to your grant writer. I mean, that's huge with that kind of money coming in.
He's done a great job.
Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful. Question number one, you mentioned in the first paragraph about the increase of calls, like over 200 calls. Do
Yep.
you have any idea what that was attributed to or what caused that?
Every time I've pretty much looked at any type of a study that we had an increase in calls, it was due to an increase in population or a very bad weather season in the winter.
Okay.
If we had a lot of snow and ice, we get a lot of
Right.
car accidents, we get a lot of
Okay.
slip and falls. This year, we're actually trending down a little bit. Which, you know, my captains were asking me, why do you think we're down? And I said, I just think because the weather's been mild. We haven't had nearly as many car accidents and nearly as many people injured, slipping and falling on stairs and hurting themselves shoveling, and that's what we do when we go to all of those calls, and we just haven't had that many of them, knock wood, so far this winter.
Great. Last question, if you don't mind. In the report, you mentioned about the fire service, EMS-based fire service.
Yep.
Is that potentially, I mean, it sounds like a potential revenue stream for the town. Is that ultimately what we're looking to do, perhaps down the road?
I think it's something that we could look at and study. It wouldn't pay for the whole fire department, but it would bring in a certain amount of money. I think Kevin could.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Speak to it. He actually, you know, Kevin, when he was in Leicester, had an ambulance service.
And has it been done in other communities? I'm assuming it has.
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of communities that do have it. We do, right now, have, the agreement that we have with UMass is free. So we do really need to study it, if it's gonna be, you know, consideration to make, you know, all-in costs and, you know, life cycle costs,
Right.
makes, things like that.
Right.
So, but we have been having an ongoing dialogue since I've been here about, you know, when to study that and, you know, if it makes sense.
Too early to tell. So you're saying, it's
sorry?
too early to tell right now?
Yeah, we haven't really put
Okay.
we haven't started the study, to be
Okay.
honest.
Is it something you're gonna do this next year, or are you gonna?
I think that, we're not 100% committed,
Okay.
but we're talking about it.
Well, it just sounds interesting, you know? Thank you, Chief.
It's one of those things, you have to put up a big amount of money up front to purchase ambulances, train people
I
to
get you.
paramedic level.
Okay.
There's a lot of moving pieces to it. You wouldn't see like profit right away, but
Right.
3 to 5 years down the road, you might start seeing,
Yeah.
and then.
Well, it's good that we're looking
sustainability
at
after
things like that now. I mean, that's important. Great report, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. That was a great report, great presentation.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question. You mentioned the grant for smoke detectors. I was wondering, does that include carbon monoxide detection as well?
does, yes.
Oh, it does, okay.
Yeah, we'll be doing some more. We've released some of the information right now. We're still in the process out to bid on who's gonna supply us the smoke detectors. So we're in the procurement process right now. But we've got a list of about 50 or 60 households that would like us to come out. We want to not just come in, put up smoke detectors, we want to do a whole safety check to, you know, reduce the risk of even injury and fire. And, I mean, if there's obvious other things, problems in the kitchen or problems in the basement that we can point out while we're there, you know, it's all part of the risk management, you know, process that we go through.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's in, I guess in regards to the SAFER grant, this is for the town manager. How is it shown in the budget? Is the full cost of the 4 firefighters in the budget, or is it just the cost to the town at this point?
Just the cost to the town isn't, just the cost to the town is within the budget. You will notice that there are increased costs, you know, elsewhere within the budget because, you know, we have extra equipment. we have
Right.
extra, you know, other things that come along with those officers, or, excuse me, with the firefighters, that we had to increase in other areas. So, you know, I just don't want you to think it's a salary line item, but as far as the salary line item does go, it is just the portion that we're responsible for.
But I guess the other stuff, basically being the equipment, is more of a one-time thing. Is that a fair statement? But we'll see the budget for salaries jump in the next 3 or 4 years as the grant depletes.
You will see the salaries jump, but there are some ongoing costs, you know, like the turnout gear will essentially be used up by the end of the academy and, so there is a certain amount of initial cost and then there's a certain amount of ongoing maintenance of their radios, maintenance of their breathing equipment, the masks and all that stuff that, when you have 4 more firefighters, 10% more, over 10% more staff, other costs are gonna go up along those same lines. And within this budget is a certain allocation for the rank of lieutenant, as we kind of work through the establishment of that.
Some of the other things we have to do is pay for physicals for the guys, and, normally we add maybe 1 or 2 guys as people retire. This year, we had 3 retirements plus 4 new personnel, so basically it was about 7 times the cost of normal this year, just to outfit firefighters and put them through the physicals and everything like that, too. Then the part that goes with it too is they have 10 weeks of fire academy training where you have guys at the academy, which leaves a vacancy at the fire department that has to be filled in some of the time too, so it multiplies overtime costs in that first year or so when the guys are basically getting trained and acclimated to the job.
I guess, I don't know who this is for, it might be for Kevin, but I noticed in one of the expense items that did increase, the utility telephone went from 14,764, almost doubled to 28,000. Could you just comment on that?
Unfortunately, the state has changed the rules of 911 with all the new enhanced 911 stuff that has come out. The town of Shrewsbury is a little bit unique in the way that that's done. The fire department here is what's it called in their terminology, a limited secondary. In the previous contracts, the state covered all costs incurred to a limited secondary. In the new contract that they signed this past year and the year before that, Comtech took it over and bought the full account from Verizon. In the process of doing that, they removed all funding for limited secondary. So now we have a additional cost of roughly $1,100 a month that we did not have to pay before, that we now have to pay the state to have the 911 circuit into the building and to have it monitored and maintained by Comtech.
And the advantage of that is if there was ever something catastrophic that happened as well at the police department, their dispatch center, they could move over to the fire station and just operate from there. It's a lot of the same equipment.
Sure.
And we wouldn't lose the 911.
Just seemed like a large telephone bill.
It is.
It's an important line.
So I've got a question then. What is the cost, the average cost for a new firefighter then, when you look at salary and all of the additional items that, come online with that we've talked about already?
I do have it, I'm just pulling out the page right now. The total is $67,873.18. That breaks down a lot of the steps, vacation, holiday pay, medical training. They have certain training stipends that contractually that they get. Educational incentive is something that also is a factor. They get a clothing allowance. There's a stipend for maintaining their EMT because there's all kinds of costs to, keeping up your EMT license. And
So that's the base rate, and then, if they would take health insurance or, do earn the educational incentive, that's in addition to.
Oh, okay. So do you have like an average, like, past employers would call it fully loaded, like if you add on the health insurance?
Yep, so we normally use like $13,000 for the average whenever we're calculating the town's responsibility for a health insurance plan.
All right, so that would be
year.
the,
Yep,
that would be the 67,8 plus 13.
Yeah, that's
Gets you
right.
to kind of what we're looking at for the cost,
yep,
So-
plus educational incentive.
plus educational
Yeah.
incentive.
Plus, you wouldn't add one at a time in this situation.
Right.
You're adding four.
Right, right, yes. So, I mean, I'm glad we have the the firefighters, but just, it is a significant investment. I'm glad we've made it, but it is a significant investment, so. Any other questions or comments from the committee?
I guess I would just like to make one comment. There was a rescue up in Boylston
Yes.
in the last week, and watching on the news, there was the Shrewsbury vehicle.
Hovercraft, yep. The hovercraft was requested over the radio from Boylston. They knew one of the people that was in the water was kind of far out, and they were having a hard time reaching him, and then there were 3 other people that attempted to help get that person out that became victims themselves. So Boylston pulled the 2 closest to shore, and Clinton has a rescue sled. They got to the 3rd person, and the one that was furthest out was actually picked up by the hovercraft.
So you're on the news.
And it was, yeah,
Was it Shrewsbury firefighters on the hovercraft, or was it Boylston?
Shrewsbury, yep. Yep, one of our newest guys, not brand new, but started over the summer. Actually was the one that, pulled, went in the water and actually pulled the victim out and helped him get into the, he had a lot of hypothermia issues. Got him in and out, so one of our newest guys actually performed the rescue.
Trial by water.
Yeah.
Any further questions or comments from the committee? Selectmen, do you have any questions? No? All right, anyone else that's in attendance? Guess that would be you. All right, okay, none, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
So are we okay to move on to planning and economic development? So that's on 128.
The planning person's here.
Good evening. Kristen Lassie, Assistant Town Manager, and oversee the Community Development Team, specifically the Planning and Economic Development Group that we'll be discussing this evening. I've included in your packets, I believe Mr. Snowden got that to you, a memo from myself to Mr. Mizikar dated November 27th, 2019. I won't go through this memo in detail, but it does go over a number of things that the department has worked on over the calendar year of 2019, and then a number of things that we are looking to accomplish in the calendar year of 2020. Before I go into that in a little bit of the detail, our fiscal '21 budget request is pretty much level service, level funded. We continue to maintain one town planner that is funded out of the general fund. We share an administrative assistant with the building inspector's office, so part of that salary is out of the general fund. The other part is out of planning board fees that are collected through applications. And then we also maintain an assistant town planner whose salary is fully funded out of the planning board fees that are collected from projects. Again, many of our general expenses remain level, have not increased in some time. So some of the large-scale things that we've worked on over calendar year 2019 is that there was a variety of zoning articles presented at 2 of the town meetings related to helping us curtail some of the creative lot development that's been occurring in town, and also to curtail some of the larger duplex projects. We do think that it's appropriate for duplexes to be located in some areas of Shrewsbury, but some of them were very much out of scale. So we believe we prepared some zoning that passed and has helped to preserve the character of the neighborhoods within the town of Shrewsbury. The department also has been very active with the state's Complete Streets program. So if you haven't heard of Complete Streets, it's a program and a concept that encourages streets, where applicable, be amenable for both vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists. So we worked with our consultant to create a prioritization plan of what streets we'd like to see move forward to create these types of areas. And we are in the process of trying to apply for what's called Tier 3, so grant funding to actually complete those projects, and also do some pilot work. The City of Worcester, through our Central Mass Regional Public Health Alliance, allows us to do some piloting of those projects before they actually go to construction. So we'll be working with them this spring on those types of items. We've been heavily involved in Route 20 corridor projects with the assistance of and the persistence of Rep. Kane, working with Mass DOT on a Route 20 corridor master plan. So many of you have attended those public hearings and meetings. Mass DOT will actually be presenting the findings of those reports next Wednesday, March 4th. So we've been heavily involved in that. And it also curtails on, the planning board just completed permitting the Edgemere Drive-In project for 250 apartments, the Market Basket project, and associated retail. The town was awarded a $3.75 million MassWorks grant for the transportation improvements associated at Lake Street and Route 20. And we continue to follow the 40B project at the Point Hills Farm at Stony Hill and Route 20, which would add additional housing to that area. Additionally, and you'll hear more from the DPW next weekend, but we're working on the Route 20 sewer expansion project as well, so the planning department has had their hands in that. We have undertaken a major project related to the revitalization of the Shrewsbury Town Center. So the 2016 master plan had a highlighted section about how the community wished for the town center to be enhanced. A grassroots effort had started to create the Town Center District Association, so a group of business owners and community members formed. We were very fortunate to receive several grants from Mass Development and the Mass Downtown Initiative Program to provide visioning for the town center, visioning for what we want to see at the Beal School site on Maple Avenue, and wayfinding. So we've completed all of those studies with the exception of wayfinding. And the planning department has prepared, through a series of public forums that occurred in November and December, a zoning package that we will be bringing to town meeting in May to talk about an actual town center zoning district that would allow for more compact development, mixed use, buildings close up to the street, landscaping, parking behind the buildings, shared parking, and the like. So thank you to many of you who participated in those public forums. We received a lot of great feedback that we incorporated into these drafts, and we look forward to presenting them in a public hearing setting with the Planning Board, Board of Selectmen, and Finance Committee in the next few months. We continue to work with the Beal Reuse Committee, the School Department, and the Board of Selectmen on the reuse of the Beal School at Maple Avenue once the Beal School at Glavin on Lake Street is available. And we are working with a consultant now with grant funding that we received from Mass Development on preparing a request for proposal for developers to respond to. We believe that that request for proposal will be available right after town meeting, as there'll be an article on town meeting to dispose of the property. We continue to work with our broker and the Shrewsbury Development Corporation at Centec Park North. We received a grant from the state's site readiness program to design and permit the North Roadway, so the subdivision roadway that is off of South Street, and the Planning Board and Conservation Commission approved that in 2019. We also went all the way through the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act review process and were awarded last month a certificate that finalized that environmental review. So our broker is reissuing marketing data based upon those two very important permitting milestones of the project. We continue to attend the Lakeway Business District meetings to enhance their work within the Route 9 corridor. We continue to work on our municipal vulnerability preparedness. So in 2018, we prepared a plan that was funded by the state. We've applied for grants twice in 2019, but were not successful, so we anticipate applying again. This will help us with climate change items, helping us revise our rules and regulations for more low-impact development, for addressing some of our sewer pump stations that might be in floodplains, and addressing our overall climate vulnerability. We continue to update our master plan in a sense from the staff view of noting our accomplishments and hope to present that to the public very shortly. We finalized our housing production plan, which allows for us to be eligible for certain grants, and also if another 40B does come in and they meet a certain number of building permits, we would be a safe harbor of 2 years for additional 40B developments to come into the town of Shrewsbury. And we're currently embarking on updating our open space and recreation plan. Those plans are good for 7 years, and our plan was coming up to date. So we will be planning a public forum in March for that project. So in general, our planning board, our planning staff's the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, the open space and recreation plan committee, the targeted zoning committee when necessary, the trails committee, Shrewsbury Development Corporation, and Beal Reuse Committee. So very diverse group, and I thank the staff very much for all of their work over the past year. Many of the things that we'll continue to work on in 2020 are reflective of what I spoke about for our 2019 work. We'll continue to work with our neighbors at UMass next door on what their plans are for their property. We continue to position ourselves in the best economic development front that we can by becoming liaisons to existing businesses and future businesses, and look forward to the many changes that may be coming in the town center district. So with that, I'll take any questions that you may have on the planning department budget. I can also just suggest that the planning board budget remains very stable, same as it usually is.
I actually have a question. In your, the memo that you prepared on the last page, you had talked about, I can see that, I believe that from your requested budget, the full-time or the part-time economic development coordinator, I'm assuming that that was the difference between the requested and the funded, is that correct?
No, so I never actually requested funding for the economic development specialist. The change in the budget is we did have half an admin budgeted, and we brought that down to 0.1 of an admin, taking 0.4 out of the planning board fees.
Okay. Would you mind talking a little bit about, I mean, I know it's not in this budget, but just your vision for the economic development coordinator?
Sure. Thank you for asking the question. So our planning staff is really focused right now on guiding our planning documents, our master plan, our open space plan, and our housing production plan, and those action items. And they're really focused on staffing the planning board and zoning board and the other boards and committees and fostering those projects that come in. My vision for an economic development coordinator or economic development director would be more of an outreach type of position that would actually be engaging with the community, engaging with the business owners, our existing business owners, on how we could help them grow and be a liaison to the permitting process, and also going out there to solicit new businesses to potentially come to town. I also see that position as a vital person who would be coordinating such efforts as quarterly or annually economic development breakfasts or evening events for the groups, working with our 2 business districts in town and perhaps expanding that as well. So I think there's a lot to be done. There's other communities that are much smaller than ours that do have this position in addition to the planning staff. And we're doing the best we can, but there's a lot more that we can be doing.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee?
I guess the question I have is, on the 40B that's on Route 20, is there any progress on that? Is that moving along?
Sure, so they did extend their permits. They were due up in November of 2019. They did renew them, or extend them for 3 additional years. They are working on the sewer plan to move forward of how they want to sewer the project, either through the Cherry Street Pump Station or another means. And we're hearing rumblings that the project may or may not be sold to another developer, but they have not abandoned the project in any fashion.
But at this point, it's just kind of on hold. it
I
seems
wouldn't
like.
say it's on hold. I think there's a lot going on in the background that is not public and not perceived to be going on.
Okay.
Last call on the committee? All right, Beth?
I just have one question. Kristen, you mentioned in your additional considerations, funding to send town planner and assistant town planner to trainings and workshops, and I'm not seeing that that was funded. Am I correct, or?
Yes, you are correct.
Any,
I guess I'll ask one more question on the Edgemere project. I guess from a timeline standpoint, you said the DPW will talk about sewering it and all of that. I mean, is that the first part of the project? Does that have to happen first? Will they start building? Will we start fixing up the intersection? I mean, what's the timeline of each one?
Sure, so the sewer project does not need to come first. The sewer just needs to be done in time for the project to come online, even though we do have a means for the project to go to the existing Arrowwood station if necessary, if our sewer project is not ready. We anticipate from meeting with the developer that they'll begin to break ground this summer. And we will also be working in tandem with Mass DOT and the developer on the Route 20 Lake Street intersection at the same time. So we should see some movement physically on that site by June of 2020.
On the site itself, but not on the road?
The road may be a little bit behind because we're still in permitting with Mass DOT at this time.
The sewer work in Route 20 has been bid and a contract has been awarded, so we'll be moving forward with that this summer.
Oh, that's good. Now, as far as the work, let's call it the intersection, because I don't know how big of a, that's all part of the Mass DOT proposal that's coming down on discussion next week. So I'm assuming if they're gonna redo all of Route 20, that's gonna be the first section done?
So there's a corridor master plan for Route 20. It's not fully designed. The Lake Street Route 20 intersection is designed at 25% right now, so we believe that will be the first project that comes of the corridor study. There's also design work that has been done at Grafton Street and Route 140 for a new signal there. There's a signal there presently, but a new configuration and signal there. We anticipate that will probably be the second project of the master plan. And there's a lot of focus at the Walnut Street, Valente Drive, Route 20 area that we anticipate may be in that same realm. So the goal of the Route 20 master plan with Mass DOT is a guide that as development comes online, DOT will be looking for developers to revamp Route 20. And as state funding comes available, they may be able to piece together other portions of the project. So Route 20 will not be redeveloped all at one time. It will be a piecemeal effort.
Okay. So it's not, I didn't think it would be all done at once. It would be like, I was guessing.
And it's not gonna be west to east or east to west. It will probably
Yeah.
be,
It's not gonna be done, let out in sections. It sounds like you've got 3 pieces that are gonna be done, and then the others will get done sometime in the future then.
yes, that is how I understand it.
Okay.
It's a plan. We haven't had a plan. We've had discrete things happen, but not on a plan. So now we have a plan that understands what needs to happen from a safety and a capacity perspective.
Well, I guess my only concern, because I went to the original meetings, and let's call it the master plan, was to have 4 lanes end to end. But if you do it in sections, I think you're gonna end up going from 4 lanes to 3 to 2 to 4 to 3 again.
Well, what's gonna happen more is that we're doing intersections. That's what this is where the major work is, not necessarily the lanes in between. It's the intersections that are being focused on. So yes, ultimately the goal is to have, a roadway that doesn't cause you to do that. But the first focus is really on the intersections, the major intersections.
Okay.
Well, I can say from living on Route 20, I'm glad there's finally a plan, and I'm glad that the intersections that we've talked about definitely need attention, so let's hope the plan turns into action, so. I just,
Fun out of it.
right, just for clarification, I think you snuck the planning board in there as well, right?
I did,
So-
yes, and just said it was a standard, no change in budget,
All right,
so
so I
I'm happy
wanna-
to answer any questions
Right,
if
so I
there's
just want to
planning
make sure
board.
that everybody's aware of that, and if there's any questions on the planning board, as well as planning and economic development. Any from the committee, any from the Board of Selectmen? Anyone else in attendance? Thank you.
Thank you.
I would really like to- Guess we'll
So, building inspector?
Route 20 is just
Um,
famous for having that.
So, this is page 131 of the budget book.
It's just awful. And it has all the trucks. So out you all.
get rid of those trucks.
Welcome.
Hello. Hi. So I'm Patty Sheehan, Building Inspector and Zoning Enforcement Officer. So this is my 10th time before you. I've been here for 10 years in this position, and I've been with the town for 23 years as a local inspector. Before this, I was in this position. So I'd just like to let you know that the budget of approximately $471,000 really consists of staff, supplies, and professional training in order to maintain all of the licenses that we have for the inspectors in our department. For the calendar year of 2019, the total receipts collected for all of the fees for the various permits is just over $637,000. So under my license as the Inspector of Buildings for this community, my primary goal is public safety. So the Inspector of Buildings is responsible for life safety systems, safe egress, and structural integrity of all buildings in our community. And all the inspectors and the Office of the Inspectors of Buildings, we work together as a team to make sure that this happens for when we review all the properties in our community. I'd like to tell you about our staff. Dale Blue is the newest member of our staff. He is our electrical inspector. He joined us in January of 2019. That's a new position. Joe Riley is been with us now since 2014. Joe also, he's our plumbing and gas inspector. Joe is also the only one to hold this position as a full-time employee. David Lyons is a plumbing and gas inspector, but he's also mechanical inspector, and he also works with the fire department as a specialty inspector for commercial kitchens. Dave has been contracted with the town for 23 years. We value all of the work that he gives to us for all of these, particularly the special inspections. Alex Moriarty, Assistant Building Inspector. So Alex has been with us for almost 2 years. April it will be 2 years. And my time as the Building Commissioner, Alex is the 4th inspector to hold this position. As for the administrative assistants, Kristen Rapolo is the administrative assistant primarily for the building inspector, and she also staffs the Zoning Board of Appeals. Kristen has been with us since July of 2018. And then we also have Emily Larson. I share Emily Larson with the planning staff. So Emily joined us in May of 2019. So the changes in our department, we had Building, Health, and Planning reorganized. Building and Health Department shared an office, and Health Department has since been relocated down the hall, and Planning Department joined us. So now the 2 administrative assistants that we have in our office, basically Emily, who's the one that is shared with the Planning Department. So now I have 1.5 instead of basically sharing equally 2 people with the Health Department. So that's increased the support that I have in my department, which I really appreciate, and I actually value the work that Emily has been doing and Kristen since they both started in these positions. Dale Blue, I'd just like to say a little bit more about him since he came on a little over a year ago as the wiring inspector. We transitioned this program from Selco to do the electrical permits and the inspection program. And actually, it's going very smoothly, and it really completes our team. It was something that was necessary, and I really value that we have the wiring inspector in my office now. I did want to talk about some of the goals that we have for the department. So the first one is to continue to educate our permit applicants. The codes continue to change, as you may or may not know. February 7th, just a few days ago, the state implemented the new energy code, 2018 energy code went into effect. We didn't get any training on that. Usually the state does train us. We didn't get any yet, so we will educate ourselves and we'll educate the applicants that come in and apply for permits. January 1st, 2021, we're expected to go to the 10th edition of the code. Unfortunately, the code will not be ready until late fall. So again, the training that we usually get may be delayed or may not be implemented before the code takes effect. There's been a lot of changes in the division of licensure in the state, and usually the training is coordinated through that department. So we're waiting to see what may be offered to us before the code comes into effect. Another one of our goals is to continue to address the ongoing issues of work performed without a permit. As you may know, I've talked about that for the past few years. That is an issue that continues to be brought to our department, particularly upon the sale of a property. But more of this type of issue has come to our attention because not only are we finding work performed without a permit, such as basements, decks, that type of thing, we're also finding residential living units, which is more of a life safety concern in our community than we've ever had. So those are becoming more and more challenging for my whole department as a staff, for each one of us inspectors. And then the third goal is then just to continue to support my staff with all of the challenging occupancies and issues that are brought to us by property owners, contractors, engineers, realtors, and potential buyers. You know, that we get an awful lot of questions about what people can do with the property, zoning-related questions, and of course, building code questions. So we try to address each question that we get is unique, and we try to address it as best as possible relative to the building code and the zoning bylaw. So, so I take any questions that you may have.
Any questions, comments?
Might be a question for Kevin. The receipts that you received from building inspection, is that a restricted revenue or an unrestricted?
It's unrestricted,
Unrestricted.
yes. I'd like to have it all.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I think if I'm understanding the tenor of your report, I think this is actually more positive than in past years with some of the personnel issues that you've had. So I think that's actually good news. I understand the code is changing and complex, but I believe that you're in much better position with your personnel.
That's exactly right, yes. We really have a good team. I'll tell you that having the addition of Dale, the electrical inspector, having the addition of Emily and sharing her with the planning department, the reorganization of the staff, I think we really have a very good team. It's just the challenges that were presented just continue to change and evolve.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. At least we've got one check in a positive box, so great.
Right.
Patty, you stated that you had picked up a half of an administrative assistant. Is that reflected in your budget, that 1/2 FTE?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? The Board of Selectmen?
Madam Chair, if I
Oh,
could just,
certainly.
excuse me. So this, I mentioned earlier in the introduction that we are attempting to still hire or change from a part-time assistant building inspector to a second full-time assistant building inspector, so that is requested within the town manager's fiscal projection 1. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. There would be a slight offset in contracted services, but that will take some time to work itself out as we get new staff on board and get them up to speed, if we're fortunate to find a qualified candidate.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Beth, go ahead.
Patty, I agree with what Judy was saying, that there definitely is a change. I think in your presentation, I felt in the past couple of years, you could just hear how the stress level in the office, because of the volume of work and not being able to get to all of it, was really evident, and it seemed different tonight. tonight, so I hope that that's a positive change in the building inspector's office. When you talk about work being done without permits, it's not the loss of the permit fee that's concerning, right? It's the fact that people are doing work in their homes and they aren't getting that important safety inspection that's a real issue. Is that sort of what you were trying to get across?
Correct, it's not the loss of revenue, it's just how to address different circumstances that apply to that condition. You know, different types of work done without a permit rise to different levels of enforcement, and it has different concerns. Certainly, the additional dwelling units that we're finding that are not permitted, that's a big concern. And it takes a lot of our staff resources to try to address it, because usually it's every single one of us in our office. It is plumbing, it's electrical, it's building, and it's fire. So I did want to add to that is, I know that Deputy Chief Colby just left after hearing the fire chief's report. Deputy Chief Colby came on after Bruce Card retired, and I'll say that that is a very important role or position for the town. I work with Seth Colby every day, talking about different occupancies, how we're going to approach them, what commercial inspections we're going to be doing, how we review permits. It has become a very important position in town. So was I able to answer your question?
Definitely, yeah, thank you.
Judy?
Oh, sorry,
Could
Pat.
Patty, could I just follow up on that? So if you find a site that didn't have proper building permits, are you able to track that back to a contractor, and what are the consequences of that for the contractor or the people who did the work without a permit?
So unfortunately, in a lot of cases, we're not able to track it back to a contractor because they didn't do it without they did it without a permit. Generally, they may not be licensed. Also, we sometimes find that the property has also changed hands. So now it becomes the current homeowner that is responsible for that work that was done without a permit. And it may be known or unknown to them. So this may be a big surprise to them, especially when they may be trying to sell the property and potential buyers are coming to our department to do research and finding that there was no permit for certain work that they know is new work in their property. So that's where our involvement begins. Certainly if it's a dwelling unit, we have to issue a violation letter, and we have to start from there to figure out how the property owner is going to bring it into compliance. As you can imagine, we have to do a lot of education as to how this happened, because they want to hear that from us. However, we do have to ask the property owner, what records do you have on your own property that you could bring to us to help us figure this out?
Okay, thanks. And that gives me a better understanding of the process and everything involved.
All right, last call for anyone, comments, questions? Great. Thank you.
So we do have actually, maybe just as Kristen said, the planning board, you know, is just, stays consistent. I also have the zoning board
Okay.
budget. That also doesn't change very much, because really what it is Kristen Rapolo, who is the administrative assistant, staffs it, and the budget really stays the same for basically her time and
So that's
supplies.
That's page 130.
So, yeah, so the zoning budget really doesn't change much.
Any questions or comments on the Board of Appeals budget? Selectmen? Anyone else? All right, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Are we expecting someone to come in for the, no? Okay.
I can just make a couple quick comments. So just like the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, this is really a budget that provides support to the Conservation Commission. It's, $1,900 a year, and it remains relatively stable because of its limited need and role within the operations of the town.
All right, any questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the Board of Selectmen? Anyone else? Last call? All right, great. So I assume at this point, this is where I ask for a motion to continue the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the public hearing is continued until Saturday, 9 a.m. Okay, great. right, so let's move on to item number 6, which is the work that John and Pat has done on the Finance Committee document. So what I would like to do is ask committee members, I'm gonna actually go around, just kind of like start over here on the left, Mark, and see if you have any feedback or comments on the document, and so we'll just go around.
No, I want to thank John and Patrick, I think David too, for the work that was put into this. You know, I think it's an improvement, you know. I know I offered some suggestions, and some of them were included, and, you know, I think it, ultimately, I think it reads better. I think it's more organized, and I think our audience will understand it better.
Erin?
I basically second that I don't have any
All right.
particular suggestions.
Jason?
Same here, Judy. It's a great document, good flow, easy to understand.
And same as they said, nothing new to add.
Okay. All right, I'm just gonna, well, obviously, you guys, Mark?
You know, I looked it over, it's a tremendous I'm allowed to say it's a tremendous improvement over last year, because I was involved in last year, so I could say it without cutting me down. But I think what's important from it is that it's designed to be simpler and more inviting, because I'm always worried that our audience, which is mostly town meeting members, but to some extent, just the residents of the town, I'm worried that it doesn't get looked at, and so I want it to be attractive and drawn in and read. So as long as it's moving in that direction, then it succeeds.
Right, Hannah?
I'm good with it. Thank you for your work.
So I had a couple, I agree actually with all the comments that were made. I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. Just reading through it, I understand, I like what you've done with the R1s through the, you know, the R1s through 9s. I like that. I'm just wondering, and I know people should look back at the budget for those, but I like the pie chart, but I'm wondering if we couldn't also include, repeat on that pie chart also, R1, R2, R3, because when I was reading through it, I was having trouble going back and forth because I have the pie chart right there, so I was wondering if that might add some clarity, just because now you're looking at that. So it's just a suggestion for readability. And then, you know, I'm not gonna bother with some minor, like, typos. Those, I think, if we have those types of comments, I think that we wanna probably email those in instead of going through that. And then, actually, you guys actually had a question on, unfortunately, they're all page 9, but it's under the expenditure section where you're labeled E1 through E5.
Yep.
And you actually asked a question, do we include a narrative of each department breakdown as stated above?
Yeah, I mean, the primary reason I left that was, at the time, this is obviously off of a chart from last year, and I know both Dave and Kevin, in putting this budget together, were making some changes.
Right.
So I wasn't sure what their changes were gonna be, so I kind of left that up for grabs. The only thing, in terms of, again, what I got E1 through 5, if you go back, they're all the community development, human services, public works, et cetera. So I guess, do we want to have those each have their own bullet, which kind of just lengthens the report, as opposed to putting all the departments in E1 through E5, and then use the fire department as an example and say, people were added to the fire department. If everything else remained consistent, there's no need to comment on all the departments individually. We could go either way. I mean, I don't care. You know, it's just that if you want me to put in, if the group sees it's good to put in 5 separate paragraphs, we can do that. That's all. I mean, the only one of the comments I got was, to some extent, people may not understand what human services is. So do we list human services as, like the library, all the departments within the human services? And I've had some discussion with Dave on that. Maybe we can identify that as part of the individual items within the warrant. We go through all the departments in the warrant, so maybe it could be, again, references human services, it wouldn't necessarily tie back here. But I don't know how many people, other than me, would go to the individual departments, add them up, and see if the number reconciles.
I don't think any. I guess my thought on the question about people don't know what are included in human services, we're sort of introducing new nomenclature. So I'm wondering if maybe, for this report, if we shouldn't maybe at least list that out, and maybe in future years, we could, pull that out as people get a little bit more used to that terminology. That's just a thought, and I do like the comment that you made about there's no sense in talking about something if there aren't any particular changes, but definitely in the fire, with the firefighters, there's been a significant change, and it's an important change for the town, and a fairly, it's a large investment for the town, so I think that definitely should be broken out and discussed. What are other people's thoughts on that?
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if there are a few highlights like that, I think the concern that John had mentioned is of just, we're trying to shorten the document and
Right.
make it more readable. So I just think any significant highlights that came up could be referenced under E1 through E5, maybe, 3, 4, 5 bullet point type of things instead of full narratives. I don't know if that makes sense.
Here's my suggestion, if there were typos or whatever, yeah, it'd be nice to get them back to clean that up. But, I mean, there's still obviously some green paragraphs in here that need to be cleaned up. And maybe in the next week or two, Kevin, I can meet with you and Dave, and that's one of the things we can talk about, how we wanna package that,
I did notice, though, that when reading through this and then reading through the great overview that you provided, there's definitely a lot of parallel. So we could maybe, if it's okay, steal some of your verbiage, because I thought, obviously, you guys did a fantastic job with that report. So I think that there's some places where we're talking about the same thing. Now, it's okay, obviously, if we use some of our own wording, but I think the wording was so well done that if maybe we could leverage some of the work that you've already done without repeating all of it, I think that would be a good way to go. So, and then I guess on the next page under E7, you did indicate that we need to that you need to rewrite that, but I guess there was one. And I guess you may get this in the rewrite, but also, I thought that it also sounded like that once we're fully funded, that we won't have to make any additional payments, which obviously we're gonna need to continue to keep up with it, so there will continue to be some payments. So I'm sure you'll catch that in the rewrite. And then, actually, you had asked another question under E8. I'm sorry, was there any, did anybody have any comments back on the E7?
No, the only comment I'll make on that is, obviously, there's a report due as of January 1st. We do it every 2 years. This January 1st is the report year, and we have not seen that yet as to where we stand.
Right.
But in the full report, it does list, it's like 37 pages long, and there is one line item with the amount of ongoing cost to the town.
Right.
So, you gotta know where it is, but yeah, once I see that report,
We'll make sure
we
that
can
that's in there.
insert it.
Okay, great.
Or if I don't get it in time, sometimes we not, I can just have a blurb that says, the town's funding is still $700,000 a year or something in that range.
Right, and then under E8, you'd asked a question about, that's the debt and interest. You'd actually asked, also, should we list the end date of the debt schedule instead of, the start date? Instead of just, I'm assuming just the start date, so my personal thought is, yes, we shouldn't, both the start and the end date. I'm not sure what the committee's thoughts are.
I think they're, if I may, I think they're both relevant. The start date, just for people looking at going, what is this?
Right.
That's what that is. Especially with some of the properties that don't say very much, like, the open space land purchase,
Right.
for
Right.
example. And the end date, obviously, for financing purposes, so I don't want to have too much stuff in this, though,
Right.
like, is
But I
it
do
really
think-
necessary
I
here,
know.
but,
It would just extend the line.
yeah.
So what's the sentiment? Do you think having the end date would be helpful to people?
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
so.
John, we could even chart that too if you want, if we had name of the project, amount, start date, end date, just
We do have some of that in our report.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to,
Right. It just puts it in
people-
kind of picture form a little bit.
Maybe,
Yeah.
yeah. I'll chat with, that's a good idea. Dave and I can talk about that.
Okay. And then, again, I think I had some things with the conclusion, although those are more, like, I think there was some typos and, et cetera, but I don't think that we need to, unless other people have comments on the conclusion at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly like input. I just sat down and started typing away and, I showed it to Patrick and he made a reasonable amount of changes, I guess. I picked up on things that I just rolled over because I was just typing away as I thought of stuff. So I certainly would like some feedback.
Okay,
You know.
great. Well, again, thank you for all the work that you've done, and obviously, it's definitely moving in the right direction. I agree that, we want people to read this and come away understanding. I guess the only other thing is that I do think that the work that you did for going through was just so well done that I'm wondering in the conclusion if we shouldn't have something in there that says refer, for more information, to refer to that document, just kind of, because there are gonna be some people that want more detail. I used to be like that, I'm less like that now, but I do think that, referring to that document would be great.
That document.
The
meaning-
fiscal,
ClearGov.
yeah,
Oh,
well, the
ClearGov.
ClearGov, and also, I don't know, was it labeled fiscal projection 1? I mean, or is it, well, I guess it's, it's here, it's where you're,
Fiscal projection 1 now.
yeah. You got your executive summary, the revenues and expenditures, so wherever those documents live, in the capital improvement plan, I mean,
That's
wherever.
pretty much all on ClearGov, isn't it?
Well, it's on ClearGov, but I'm talking about the detailed narrative to go with it. So we definitely should refer to ClearGov, but what is that document?
It's the fiscal projection 2021 financial plan.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about.
So, but is that presentation anywhere available to the public, that specific presentation, and where would we refer to that?
You mean the one on the left here? That's the one you're talking about, which is our budget package.
Our budget package, not just not
Okay.
the PowerPoint, but the budget packet.
Right, so we just refer people to the budget
Yeah,
page.
okay, that's what I'm talking about.
And
Sorry about,
I would just like to comment that John did the majority of the work on this document.
I just
and
did the typing.
I just wanted to thank you for it. No, and I just,
Hired typist.
I added in, a few comments, and just going back to the Rs and the Es, I believe that was a recommendation from Mark Murray, so thank you for that, Mark. I think it kind of puts everything, it organizes things a lot better, so thank you for that recommendation.
Welcome.
and if people haven't looked at the ClearGov, they really should. It's beautiful.
I will say that, now John's in retirement, he has the time to dive in pretty deeply.
So
thank you
last
for
call
this.
on this document. Any other comments? So when do we want to get comments to David so that you can fold them back into another draft?
Another week? I mean, we've only had this a few days, so I don't know, 10 days, but I don't have a calendar with me. Because we certainly want to get it done by the 26th, right? Because that's, in a month, but, I mean, once I get comments, I can take a day to type them up, so even by, say, a week from Friday is the 6th, is that okay with everybody?
So-
We can make any more comments?
March 6th? Okay,
We want to give them the weekend, get it to me on the 9th. How's the 9th?
okay. The 9th, okay. All right. Okay. All right, great. All right. Now we'll move on to, I think that takes us to the correspondence. So we had.
Get it to David, I said get it to me, we're gonna send it to David.
Yeah, send it to David and he'll give it to you, all right. Correspondence, email to the Finance Committee from Sandy Fritz, the school committee chair. And then a second email to the Finance Committee from Sandy Fritz, which was regarding the State of the District, the 2020, which was, it's a very good document. It certainly outlines, all that's on the school plates and, some of the pressures. So, and we're certainly going to be hearing more about that in a couple Saturdays. Email to the Finance Committee from State Representative Hannah Kane regarding the filing of the governor's fiscal 2021 budget proposal. A second email from State Representative Hannah Kane regarding the Baker Polito administration files for the $200 million in Chapter 90 local transportation funding, highlights fiscal year 21 local aid proposals. And then email to the committee from Chief Vonner regarding the state grant for the Student Awareness of Fire Education Program and Senior Safe Program. And letter to the Finance Committee from Timothy D. Deschamps? Deschamps, thank you, Executive Director, Central Mass Mosquito Control Program, which is kind of fun to think about now, but that's a very important program that we all think about in the summer. All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Thank you, Judy.